And we're live, and it's wonderful to be here. The first Duda webinar for me, first in a series. This is all about crawling and indexing, and I'm really pleased to be here. We're going to have 4 or 5 webinars in a row, one a month for the next 4 or 5 months, starting with crawling and indexing with the fabulous Fabrice Canel from Bing. I call him Mr. Bingbot, and he is one of the more delightful people that I've talked to about crawling and indexing. Welcome, Fabrice.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. Pleased to be here to help the community at Crawling and Indexing.
Can you actually tell us what you do? Because I always just call you Mr. Bingbot, and that's not fair, is it?
Yeah, I'm downloading the internet every day. This is what I do all day. No, this is, I am at 24 years at Microsoft, and I'm in charge of the web data platform. I will detail a little bit what this is during this hour coming. But it's at the end, it's all about discovering the best content on the internet, downloading it, processing it, and getting the most of it. And this is also a big webmaster tool to help you getting your content indexed.
Which is a brilliant explanation, and I can't think of anybody who would have done it better. Next up is Dawn Anderson, the delightful Dawn Anderson, who is one of the smartest people I know, alongside Fabrice, of course. Sorry, Fabrice. Love talking to you every time, Dawn. You bring stuff to the table that I hadn't thought about and present it in a way that I wouldn't have thought about thinking about it in that way, which doesn't make sense. But please go ahead. Who are you? What do you do? And what would you like to share?
Yeah, thank you for the invitation. Again, like Fabrice, I'm delighted to be here. I'm Dawn Anderson. I've been SEO for 14 years now. It's gone quick. I'm just a normal SEO, but I like to dig around in all the research papers, and I'm kind of a bit nosy, really. I'm really interested about the crawling side of things. And I've got a small, they say boutique, don't they? Boutique agency called Bertie in Manchester. And yeah, and I'm going to be talking to you obviously about search and crawling and indexing today. No pressure, of course, being on a panel with a search engineer. I don't really want to be telling him teaching my grandma how to suck eggs, but there you go.
Absolutely brilliant. What I do love, and I've been kind of saying, you know, Dawn, you're one of my favorite people for the theoretical side, and Fabrice, one of my favorite people, or my favorite person for the practical side of all of this. I think we've got the perfect team of Dawn and Fabrice together. This is going to be absolutely delightful and wonderful. So welcome to everybody in the audience. Now, everyone's saying hello, absolutely wonderful to see all these people we know and love. And if you have questions or you want to make a point, please do post them in the chat. We're really interested to hear what you've got to say and to answer for Fabrice and for Dawn your questions around this topic of crawling and indexing. And the format of these webinars is going to be a presentation today from Dawn, relatively short, maybe 15 minutes. Then we go on to the chat, the discussion between Dawn Anderson, Fabrice Canel, and myself, Jason Barnard, with questions from the audience. So do post your questions as you think of them throughout Dawn's presentation and as we discuss later on. So I think it's about time to get going with this first Duda webinar, and I'm terribly excited. Welcome, Fabrice. Welcome, Dawn. Please, Dawn, can you take it away and give us an introduction to crawling and indexing as you see it, as you understand it, with your super duper insights?
Okay, I shall share my screen then. Give me a second to just get myself set up here. And I shall, one sec.
And in the meantime, I'll remind everybody that we are actually going to have these webinars one a month, approximately, for the next 4 or 5 months, covering things like rendering. And because I'm here, obviously, at some point, we're going to cover brand SERPs. You can't get away from them when I'm anywhere near a webinar, a podcast, an article, or a social post. Take it away, Dawn.
Okay, so as I say, we're talking about indexing and crawling today. And when I was invited by Anton and Jason, they told me that Fabrice was here. So I was kind of, oh, yikes, you know, what can I say that a search engineer from Bing can't say. But hopefully I'm going to dig into a few things that maybe search engineers don't necessarily want to talk about or they can't talk about. And I can share things I've read in a lot of the literature and things from my own experience over the years as well. So, how to crawl your way into ranking with indexable content. Bit of a spoiler. Hopefully, we'll cover the less obvious, but there's a bit of a spoiler in that. Ultimately, here is a statement of the obvious. Indexing does not guarantee ranking, but not getting indexed does guarantee not ranking. You've got to be in it to win it, ultimately. And obviously, there's another earlier part of that process, because to get indexed, you must be crawled. You must be discoverable, findable, and so forth. And there's a lot to crawl out there. You know, there's so many URLs, increasingly. Everybody's a publisher nowadays. Every single tweet is a URL. And obviously, search engine resources are not finite. There are considerations for any company, however big they are. Financial, environmental, never more so than environmental, of course, and computational expense. Efficiency, these efficiency versus effectiveness considerations don't just impact crawling and indexing, they also impact ranking as well. You know, that's why for many, many years, there's been like multi-stage retrieval and ranking systems, in that obviously there's an initial fetch and then fine-tuning of a top case set of results with more expensive computational methodology, the pipeline. But even if they did have all infinite numbers of resources, why would you stock your shelves with things that no one wants? If we consider a search engine is ultimately, an offering, a value proposition with the customers as searchers, why would you have things in there that nobody wanted? So it kind of follows like a demand-driven crawling and indexing. Demand is obviously driven by queries. And I imagine increasingly so, as things have got more and more sophisticated, a dynamic index like this that follows demand and supply, if you like, contracts and swells, because things are always changing. Not only is content changing, but query intent is shifting, demand is shifting, seasonality and so forth. And, this is my guesstimate, query intent shift probably impact crawling and indexing as well. What's the point of crawling things that are not going to be looked for 6 months or indexing them? Is that URL worth it? There must be a system. There's got to be a system, a schedule, and we know of this as crawl scheduling. There's got to be queues, crawl queues, and there's got to be thresholds to entry, barriers to entry. What's the minimum that we're going to have in place before we'll say, well, you're not good enough, you're not coming in? From the literature, tiers, crawl tiers, importance tiers, I mentioned a lot. So obviously, the higher up the tiers you are, the more important you are, and there's many tiers along the bottom, many URLs along the bottom tier that might not get a lot of love. And we kind of see the process as being a bit like this: the frontier, initial discovery, going out looking for URLs not seen before, finding new URLs, extracting them, queuing them, rendering them, indexing, and then starting the whole process again, refreshing, because content is constantly changing. But which URL should be first? Not everyone can get through the door at the same time. So there must be priorities. And we know that from not just people from Bing, but people from Google and from all the literature, crawling is mostly driven by importance. But how do we determine importance? Because not all content is equally important. Not all content changes very often. Not all change is massively important. And resources are not finite, although they are extensive. And we have this growing flood of content. So it's like two primary notions, really, that drive importance: demand and safe crawling. As I've said, search engines probably stock their shelves with content that people want. That would only make sense. And then politeness. One of the rules of the internet, crawling politeness, never damage the host. Why on earth would you? Well, you could, you can't take down a server. So if you're getting like loads of server errors, you're not just going to keep on battering it to death. It's a notion that we commonly in the SEO space call crawl budget, if you like. But here's the thing, in all the papers that I've read on crawling, not once is the word crawl budget ever used. So I suspect it's a phrase that is, used by search engines to communicate with us in the SEO community. It's kind of a familiar notion that we can get our heads around. But ultimately, it's around host load and demand. But it will have this behind it, this notion of Zipf-ian distribution, i.e. a long tail, because there will be a very, very few number of URLs that are very, very popular. Most URLs will be rarely visited by anyone. A few URLs will be linked to hugely, and most URLs will have few or no links. And you only have to read the papers. Ricardo Bieza-Yates did a really big study on the patterns of the power laws of the web, and the whole web follows these patterns, with the exception of the .com, actually, that is slightly more skewed in its favour. But generally speaking, they all follow this Zipf-ian pattern. So effectively, importance follows power law distribution. I don't know what that slide's going to say. It's on a delay, so hopefully it's going to come through really quickly. So ultimately, I'm not going to go back to it. I'm just going to, one sec. Right. So ultimately, again, from what I've read in all the literature, to make sure they're following the most important URLs, crawling tends to follow what they call a breadth-first approach. So wide, following layers downwards rather than just following a rabbit hole that goes deeper and deeper. Because obviously, going wide rather than deep means that they're likely discovering and crawling more important URLs, going wide rather than deep, because these deeper pages may be less important. So why bother? Is it safe to crawl? Is there a good yield of informational value to be gained down that path? And obviously, crawling many pages that are very, very similar or with low value, programmatically driven, for instance, at scale, with not a lot of difference between them, like boilerplate stuff, can result in redundancy if all of those were indexed and returned. Poor experience for searchers. And that's where, for instance, search engines will detect these clusters of pages that are very, very similar or don't meet that many queries, but they're all like totally focused on just the same query, but over and over again, query cluster candidates. And it's about really finding that canonical amongst them. Dust detection. Do not crawl in the dust. Avoid these massively parameter-driven websites that don't add a huge amount of value. Although some can add value, I have to say that, if they're done well, obviously. So it's kind of URL pattern prediction and realizing where there are problems and swerving those problems, really. And obviously, we've said crawling is driven by change frequency and possibly, predicting value from patterns, site sections, predicting change frequency and predicting substantive change frequency, i.e. when is something important likely to change on that page, as well as all the discovery stuff. So looking at really, if you say these are hints and probability determination to build a schedule, and obviously dropping things out of the index that are either really low quality or maybe there is a seasonality to that. Not a seasonality as such, but demand as well, a demand-driven dynamic index pruning. To get indexed, obviously, search engines must be aware of your content. That's the discovery and refresh stage, and that's the frontier. The discovery is pages not seen before, going out, discovering unknown stuff. And also, obviously, as we know, it's mostly by following links or URL patterns, nodes and edges in data structures, So we need to make sure everything's well connected, XML sitemaps, informative intent and query-driven internal anchors to pass strong clues, and strong relatedness clusters. Yeah. And obviously even things like indicating in a URL file names what's actually at that destination, be just very strong hints. And then obviously utilizing things that search engines do provide, like feeds and APIs. Well, we provide the feeds, and obviously the likes of Bing has an API, for instance. Making sure obviously everything is crawlable and renderable. And obviously to index renderable content is optimal. However, why do I say optimal rather than essential? Because search engines can still index unrenderable content, unfortunately, sometimes, and you can end up with pages that are there's not a good experience. You'll often see it when pages are blocked to robots but still indexed. So ultimately, better crawling from an SEO practitioner perspective comes as a result of overall quality improvements to the whole site pie, if you like. Fixing things like generational craft and cleaning legacy, being consistent with everything, canonical tags, so Google obviously, rather than Bing, consistent internal linking, and helping search engines build confidence in which to choose if there are clusters of very similar pages in there. Building confidence in the predictions, in the canonicalization, because consistency provides clarity, and consistency grows confidence for search engines that actually this is probably the right target as they crawl it more and more. Consistency is king. Yeah. So that's my short presentation. Over to you, Jason and Fabrice, and here's a cake. Not really, but here you go.
Well, thank you very much. That was absolutely brilliant. I've got loads of notes that I've written down on my piece of paper here. Thank you very much, Dawn. That was delightful. My first question is actually, you mentioned it throughout that, is the sheer volume. Fabrice, can you give us an idea of just how much you're dealing with?
I'm dealing with a lot of content. This is, I used to say that, and I'm always telling that the internet is as big as the Pacific Ocean. This is really, really huge. This is almost infinity. And this is the size of a Bing or Google index. This is this kind of cup of water. In fact, every day we can discover something as 70 billion distinct URL at Bing that we have never seen before. This is URLs that are normalized with parameters, cleanup, and things like this. So every day we crawl, and this frontier keep expanding. And yeah, we don't have capacity to handle everything, and there is no way to crawl everything on the internet every day. So this is a real problem, and you need to help us and guide us to the good quality content that you care, because you may have infinite loop links to random pages. You may have a calendar with next day, next day, next day, next day, up to year 9999 and before the Christ. And so this is at the end, this is infinity. So please help us and guide us to the good quality content.
Right, because I mean, you mentioned 70 billion pages every day that you have never seen before. A lot of that is junk, and you have to actually just get rid of that and not even bother either crawling it potentially or even indexing it. And there is a whole system, from what I understand, that some of these links you simply won't follow, and some of them you simply won't index. And that means that from our perspective, any pages we get in your index, we're lucky, or we've informed you incredibly well.
Yeah, think this big data funnel that is really, really huge at start. This is the internet. And then this is what we discover. This is a smaller part of the internet. And then this is what we select. So we have to pre-select what is the internet. If obviously we know that this is a spam site, we may not follow links, because who care about the spam links? And then this is what selection is for crawling. Mean this is before crawling, we have to pre-select what we want to crawl. And then we will crawl some of the content and decide if we want to index it or not. Obviously, if we find dead links, we will not index it. If we find a redirect, A go to B, we will try to index B and not index A, because it's just a redirect. And at the end, yes, we have a smaller Bing index or the Google index or Yandex index and so on. So a smaller version of the internet is indexed at Bing and other search engine, and you can help us, guide us, to make sure that the relevant content is indexed.
Brilliant, which is kind of what you were saying, Dawn. I like the concept of dust because it explains it in a way that anybody can understand. Dust.
Yeah.
That's a big problem. It's up to us to sort it out. Is that correct?
Well, there's a lot of literature out there, and we see it actually in Bing Webmaster Tools, and we see it in Search Console, where there's areas of sites, for instance, that just, if there are problematic sites, they don't get crawled that often, or you'll see, like in Google Search Console, it's known as discovered, not crawled, that kind of thing, where you can tell that ultimately a pattern has been detected of just lower quality, poor quality, and URLs and site sections that really just don't provide a good yield of unique and compelling content, or just even something that's substantively unique. So I can't remember who the paper's by, but dust is a pretty famous concept in web content spam. Do not crawl in the dust. And really it was around duplication of content, just mirror websites just being churned out and out and out, and detecting them really from URL patterns ultimately.
Right, and that's a really, really good point, is how good are these machines, how good is BingBot and presumably Googlebot at realizing that this is simply churned out content, spun content, and just saying, let's ignore it? Because kind of from our perspective, what I see is vast amounts, the little I do write online gets rechurned by other people and rewritten by ML, which is absolute junk, and it's very depressing. How easy is it for you to figure that out and just say, well, let's ignore it?
Yes, search engines are doing basically two things to have a clean index. One is to try to remove the junk and the spammy content and the useless content. So this is about cleaning, and you can continue cleaning forever. You can clean your house. It will be always in not the perfect order, and you will continue cleaning it. So because things will be messy, you will invite people, and this will upset you, and you will have to clean things. This is the same thing. This is all about cleaning, about detecting what is good and not good. The other thing that is helping cleaning is if you do a perfect selection, if you do better at selecting the content, so at finding the good links, the good information, classifying the page appropriately, then, okay, you can have a better input and so a better system. So this is this two dimension about, hey, I want to remove the junk and I want to get to select the best content. Often we don't know. We simply don't know because we should obviously satisfy the Bing user and trying to index the best of the content. And so often we have no clue about what this content is all about, especially when you just realize a new site that may be very interesting. This may be the new iPhone 13 from Apple. Is it a good page or not? And so you have to crawl to discover, yeah, it's a good page. And then you can index it. And so then you discover this content and use it and feel that this is important moving forward.
But at the stage of crawling and indexing, you're not analyzing the text to understand if the text is actually helpful. You're looking at more of the technical aspect of it to say, is this a legitimate web page?
So we do, this is more a streaming system that is analyzing real time the content that is coming back and providing a feedback loop to understand, okay, if we need to continue crawling more or less of this content, including recrawling it because we may detect that this content should be updated, classified as updatable in the future.
Right, and sorry, go ahead, Dawn.
Sorry, I was going to say, but you just talked about discovery of a URL there, Fabrice, for example. As you crawl that URL more and more and more, you'll learn the patterns of whether it's valuable, whether it changes frequently and so forth. And obviously that data will feed back into how often it's crawled and so forth, presumably.
Yeah, I think that search engines are evolved. This is obviously the case at Bing. I believe this is also the case at other search engines, where we move away from basic heuristic things, where we say, okay, this URL, I will kind of tag it and we will call it in 5 days. Everything is more a big data thing, where there is a lot of machine learning in play, and we feed the data with useful data from what we collect and feature, and the system is able to understand the whole thing and be able to fetch or not fetch the content based on what we want to do. At the end, it's always about satisfying the big user. So what is important is the machine learning is great, but Webmaster knows when the content is updated. So it's all about, I can spend my rest of my life to try to do a way better job. I will not do as good as the webmasters. And webmasters have tools to help us, search engine, to understand when the content has been modified and which content should be crawled. So I will, in this kind of discussion, I want to also put some emphasis on these ways to get search engine mix smarter. Because in some cases, sites are very noisy from a SEO standpoint, lot of URL parameter, lot of useless things. Or same for very good quality site, you can really help us to guide us to the good content that we should crawl.
Brilliant.
I was going to say a lot of that comes down to consistency, doesn't it, Fabrice, as well? Consistency in like internal linking, consistency in what is included in a sitemap, consistency and accuracy in things like last modification, last mod, and so forth.
Yeah, there is a technical side of SEO that is at the end very important, and often people are not looking at their URL and not doing a great job. So it starts by the content management system. If out of the box the content management is great, often this will really ease SEO in terms of ability for search engine to discover the content and get the content index. Then this is all about the content. Obviously, if you write some empty pages, junk pages, search engine will say, okay, this is mostly useless, I will not index that. So it's kind of a data funnel where, yes, search engine will try to do their best to understand the site and how the site is linked and generated, but really there is a big play in webmasters and the community helping us to get this content index and be refreshed. You spoke about sitemaps, very good. Please use sitemaps to link on a daily basis all relevant URL on your site. This is kind of a snapshot. You speak about being API. Yeah, the world is kind of changing from crawling to API world, where you can ping us to tell us, hey, please, I have added or updated or deleted this URL. Please take this into account in your system.
Brilliant. And one thing that strikes me from all of that is you were saying you're cleaning and cleaning and cleaning, and it's never completely clean. The more we help you by pre-cleaning, the better we will be indexed and the easier it is for you. Does that bring us any kind of advantage by pre-cleaning for you?
Absolutely. So this is clearly what you should do, because you do this not only for Bing, you do this also for Google, you do this for all search engine. So this is, at the end, think search engine are a customer. If a customer go to your site and clicks links and see various things and have to click again and click again to discover the content, it's a bad story. If this is a very clean site, well, with a good information architecture in terms of URL, you can navigate quickly to the content, you will be satisfying not only your customer, but also search engine. So where I am headed is think search engine as your customer. They say just satisfy your customer first, focus on them, and do a little bit of extra for search engine, such as sitemaps, API to guide us to the good quality content, and you will be very successful. There is sites, we never heard of them. They never complaints because they are perfectly indexed in all search engine. And then there is the troublemaker. There is sites where there is a lot of extra parameters, a lot of things. This is difficult to find the content. There is a lot of links. There is a ton of JavaScript with action on the page and things like this. We are not yet at this stage of understanding what customers are clicking on button and filling forms and things like this to access the content. Do basic things. It works.
Brilliant. Yeah. Absolutely wonderful. So can we move on to a couple of questions from the audience? Because we had a question from, I think it was JP Sherman. That was pretty cool. There you go. Are there processes in indexation crawling that you'd consider to be more important to focus on than others? Like for people who work in internal search, and that's his special subject, is internal search.
I am looking at the question again.
Oh, I think he's kind of looking for this kind of priority list of what should I really focus on to really help you with that clean crawl and make sure that you find the right pages as quickly as possible and make sure they're indexed correctly.
Yeah, it depends on the state of a site. Some sites may be very clean from a SEO standpoint, have a good URLs things. And in this case, I will focus on two things. One is I will focus on maybe adopting Bing a Webmaster Tool API to really guide us to the latest content as soon as possible. The second thing is that if a site is really junky, really, this is hard for search engine to index it. Yeah, sitemaps will help to discover all this content that matter. I will also work obviously on cleaning the information architecture, on cleaning these URLs and parameters. And what I will do is also adopt Bing Webmaster Tool API. This API is key to guide us to what change on the site. Major website, LinkedIn, eBay, and others have adopted. eBay, let you imagine, this is hundreds of millions of URL every day, and they care about us indexing specific pages that matter for their business. A very good scenario for Bing, where we have this integration and they guide us to this URL that are updated, helping us to index the content that matter, not only for eBay, but also for eBay customer and Bing customer.
Right. Okay. And it is that thing. Kind of. One thing I wanted to ask is how much junk is out there, and junk in the sense not of spam, in the sense of people messing up their navigation, ending up with lots of get parameters with gazillions of pages. How much of that, what percentage of all the stuff that you actually look at ends up being useful in any way, manner, or form?
This is a good question. I will not tell you the size of a big index if you try to get this, because it's something that is obviously we cannot disclose. But as I told you, we discover kind of 70 billion distinct URL every day that we never seen before. And a lot of this content is kind of useless, but some may be useful. I mean, again, you may have a calendar page with event, and next day. And yeah, you may have a game, a soccer game or whatever, next weekend. So to get to this page, often you need to follow links in calendar and elsewhere to get to these pages, and having kind of pages in the middle that are very little content to no content.
So something like that, a good way to deal with that is obviously to create a shorten that click path to that individual event, but presumably search engines have systems in place to avoid that forever crawling, haven't they? They don't go deeper, looking. They'll know when to stop, won't they? They'll know. But as you say, they'll probably stop before they get to that event 30 days on. So the answer is obviously to shorten the click path to all the actual events by having one page that has links to all the events.
Yeah, this is obviously you can guide to the most relevant content. Again, sitemap is a great way to inform search engine of what truly matter. So yes, you can have a calendar page, calendar widget that will confuse search engine. But if you have a links in the sitemaps, maybe we will favor these links in the sitemaps because all your sitemaps links may be linking to relevant content. And so the machine learning may understand, okay, the sitemaps matter for the business in terms of discovery because all the content we discover is important. And you can do this also from web pages. So you can have a web pages that is listing obviously all your event on the website that is helping us to discover all the real event instead of calendar empty content pages.
Right, and part of our aim is to have Bing spend as little time as possible on our site to actually digest all the content.
Yeah, where I am headed in terms of kind of direction for my team, this is really at the end to be guided by the webmasters. Again, I've got plenty of PhDs, my team have PhDs. This is not about being super smart and trying to perfectly understand what webmasters are doing. This is we are in a world where the future is certainly having more smarter content management system integrated with search engine to tell them, hey, I modify this content. Please delete this content. Sometimes there is things that we cannot decide because we cannot really think about when you will post your JSON down your next blog post. You may be delayed because you are doing this podcast and okay, maybe tomorrow you will finally post your next blog. I don't know. So as you know, ideally, you or obviously the content management system behind the scene should tell, hey, I have updated, I had added this URL. And then you may discover, oh, there is a typo, and I've got to fix it. And you will fix this kind of text in your blog. Again, why waiting weeks or days for search engine to discover this and to take into account this change? Again, the content management system should tell us, hey, my page has changed. Then someday you may delete this URL for whatever reason. You have a new one that is better. Again, same story. Why having this legacy content index for days, weeks, months often in search engine? So I do believe that the future is about within the 2 to next 3 years, we will see really more content management system adopting APIs, but this is for being all over search engine, to really help them to understand the latest of the internet.
Right, because I kind of get the feeling with APIs, I can think, oh, I don't want to bother Bing or Google by submitting this page because I just changed one character in. But actually, relatively speaking, to actually forcing you to crawl it and figure it out for yourselves, that's quite a favor I'm doing you.
Yeah, this is a favor. This is, again, you will be always smarter than search engine. You will be.
Thank you. Me personally.
Yes, because you know what you do with your site. You know when you write content. We don't. We can try to figure it out. We can have machine learning really optimized for JSON website. Okay, maybe we will not do this because it will cost really a lot of money to try to be as smart as you. But at the end is, you know more than me. So where I believe really there is opportunity for the industry to change the way we are doing this day. This is, I do believe in kind of notification to search engine to help having the latest content index and to help reducing greenhouse of this crawling that is ongoing to crawl content that really do not matter for the business. So I do believe in this direction. We are working on kind of easing this ability for website content management system to notify us and other search engine. And at some point, I do believe that maybe half the industry within the next 2 to 5 years will be moving to that, if not more. Yeah, there will be always this kind of 20% of sites that are not adopting this API. This is still fine. We will continue improving machine learning. But yeah, this is the future. And we are kind of transforming little by little the industry toward this model.
Brilliant. Right, and can we move on? Dawn, you were talking earlier on about templating and consistency. You were insisting that consistency is key. I can't remember, was it king? Can you reiterate that, and then we can have Fabrice make a comment?
Yeah, I mean, I see a lot of the time where there's, for instance, it's not really a templated approach as such, but I see a lot of like e-commerce sites or, directory sites or travel sites or sites where ultimately there's a lot of pages that are potentially quite similar to each other, and they could potentially end up in what could be considered clusters, query clusters. Fabrice hopefully knows what I mean about canonical clusters, like pages really that are, any one of them could be considered a good representation of a page to meet that query, if you like. So it's kind of knowing which one to choose from a cluster. So I think one of the biggest areas where I've seen improvements is deciding which is the target canonical. It's a little bit like the parameters that can really mess things up. It's like being consistent in the internal linking to websites, that have like many URL parameters or pages that could be considered near duplicates or very similar pages. So yeah, I've seen huge improvements on websites where we've helped to be really consistent in inclusion in XML sitemaps, in consolidation to stronger pages, gathering up weak pages into stronger pages and so forth, and just making sure that you're consistent in all your internal linking and so forth.
Right. I mean, and that comes down to basically making sure that your content is compact and senseful for your audience. And as Bing, as Fabrice said earlier on, Bing is one of your users who's actually trying to digest this content. And Fabrice, in terms of structural HTML, that consistency across categories, for example, all the categories having the same HTML structure, all the blog pages having the same HTML structure, the product pages, and so on and so forth. How important is that to Bing?
Yeah, this is obviously very important. I will explain also what's happening in the industry in terms of search engine, and especially related to machine learning, and related why consistency matter, and why this matter to have a very clean site with good structured data. Let me do some machine learning 101. Machine learning 101 is not about machine only. This is about judgment. You come up with a set of URLs and let's say judgment about these URLs are good, not good, and so on. And then, and queries associated with that. And then you are doing the machine. The machine is trying with all the metadata and all the data that the machine has access to, is trying to find the best ways to retrieve a specific content for specific queries. This is what machine learning is all about. Where consistency, as we speak about consistency, where it matters. This is the internet is kind of infinity. But if you sample it, you will have a set of common things. Lot of the internet is built, let's say, on content management system, where some content management system are vastly adopted by a lot of customers. Some sites have, different structure, but at the end, the about page will be about the about page, and you will have a search, and you will have a product page, and things like that. So you have consistency in the internet. Yeah, the internet is huge, but think content management system, think linking, think words on your page, and things like that. So when you mix all of that with machine learning, consistency matter. Why? Because at the end, this is kind of helping to match kind of the most relevant things that is on the internet where there is good quality judgment. So if you are consistent in terms of using things that is kind of similar to other things, then you have more ability for the machine learning to retrieve your content. So this is kind of little bit abstract, but think that consistency matter, especially in the world of machine learning, because if you do something that is completely off, again, I spoke before about crazy website with JavaScript things where you need to click the button, things to access the content. Yeah, you are off. And this won't be part of the machine learning default things. This will be something else. And I don't know if the search engine will be great at indexing this something else things. You can experiment. Maybe this will work. But if you are more consistent, more likely you have higher chance to be succeeding.
So I mean, basically, unless you have a really good reason, stick to a CMS that the machines already know if you want to be correctly indexed. And that good reason has to be an incredibly important business reason to build that bespoke JavaScript jazzy site.
Yeah, and this is not necessary to take the market leader. This is to take a lot of content management systems are doing very great. New ones are doing very great at SEO. So this is just if you are default, where you see this kind of default SEO things that is really great. Okay, search engine will kind of, again, it's not us, it's the machine learning that will favor, hey, this is great stuff and great. So this is kind of a niche. But this can expand to things that really help you to drive a business moving forward.
Oh, absolutely brilliant.
So ultimately then, Fabrice, it's really about pattern recognition and prediction. Pattern recognition and prediction combined, isn't it? It's like learning, and being able to predict probability that X is the canonical to choose to index from a group of candidates, if you like.
Yeah, as I explained, the internet is huge, and including top website. I've got daily emails about, hey, we cannot find this content on this site. It's a problem we need to look at. Okay, I'm looking at this, and I try to optimize the system to be able to find this content and exit and so on. There is big website. They are never surfacing on my mailbox because they do great. This is just there, out of the box, good SEO, good indexing, sitemaps, RSS, API, everything is gone. I don't have what we call a DSAT, where customers are dissatisfied by the links, cannot find. It says everything is great. We may have ranking issues, Mean, okay, this content should be at top position, but at least from my standpoint, this content is indexed. Great story, not my problem anymore. I focus on sites that still do not follow the rules and having issues to be indexed at Bing.
Brilliant. Next topic I wanted to cover, because I think we've done a great job on that one, is query-driven, demand-driven, which is what you were talking about, Dawn. Can you quickly summarize that and then have Fabrice reply to the idea of query, demand-driven crawling and how it prioritizes?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, we know that there is things like query intent shift, where there's the classic example of Easter, which is in all the papers that talks about how the literature talk about is the famous one. On Easter Day, people are looking for the word Easter to understand what Easter's about. On any time other than, you know, the 2 weeks before, people want to know when Easter is, when they put the word Easter in. And then 2 weeks before, they really are looking for things to do and what's happening and so forth, or shops or whatever. Yeah, Easter eggs. So obviously that is kind of what you could consider some sort of a seasonality impact. And we've used the example of like Halloween, for instance. Will there be more crawling on websites that only focused on Halloween costumes in March, for instance, when there's absolutely no demand? Probably nobody's looking for Halloween costumes in March unless they're a bit mad. So will that impact crawling and indexing? And if you like, I'm kind of likening the search engine to a shop that would only, you know, they want to stock things that actually are being looked for at that moment in time. So is that happening?
Absolutely. So two dimensions to the problem. One is I spoke about how huge the internet is, Pacific Ocean things, and there is somehow, unfortunately, a lot of content that are still not indexed by search engine. Some maybe should we index it is a borderline things. Example, the NASA is having a lot of data about stars and galaxy and whatever, a lot of things like this. It's a petabyte of data about things and text file. Okay, should we really link to this? It's kind of start to be the underground internet. Yeah, you can go to this database and find it, but should we index it? Maybe not yet. This is not really a business for Bing to go to this really super deep content and databases. So first dimension is sometime we know about the content, but we are not willing to go too deep because it will take forever to crawl it. And second is that maybe nobody will ever search for this. Second dimension about seasonality, the goal of my team is really to prep the index for today's queries and tomorrow's queries. Yesterday query may inform us about today's queries and tomorrow query. But again, last week was about iPhone 13 release. Today is about Microsoft Surface things released. So it's all about having the index ready in terms of new URL as soon as the content is coming alive and immediately in terms of seconds to minutes after the content goes live. Second thing is that, yeah, position in the index may matter based on seasonality. Mean that there may be some more importance given to some holidays things that are coming versus some things that may be more summerish time frame. Because at the end, this is always to satisfy the index, satisfy having an index that is satisfying the queries. This means not only getting it indexed, but getting it in top position to again make it easier for my sister team to retrieve the content at Bing.
Brilliant. So basically, to what extent do we have kind of query driven, i.e. before Easter, queries for Easter start building up, therefore you will start crawling that type of content more? And as Easter approaches, people create more content. So it's supply driven crawling. To what extent is that kind of important to you guys?
I think it's overall, this is just about having an index that satisfy customer queries. So it's, yeah, if you generate content, as there will be more content with the holidays coming related to holidays, yeah, we will get this content indexed. And it's kind of by design of the internet. We try to have an index that is business driven to satisfy customer. And so, yes, this is taken into account in indexing this content. But it's not really, don't think also, it's just one of the dimension. This is just about, at the end, this is all about satisfying tomorrow's queries and today's queries. That's it. It's so machine learning will learn, oh yeah, there is this kind of dimension and size that are important. And so we will make sure that they are deeply indexed.
Brilliant. Wonderful. So kind of you're listening to both the supply and the demand, and the crawling will adapt, but not immensely, but certainly there is a change. And you talked about our sister teams. And I remember talking to you guys, everybody, all the people at Bing, when we had those conversations, everybody said, without Fabrice, we couldn't do our job. How fundamental is your job? I mean, everybody just says...
it's not me. This is obviously there is a big team behind me.
Sorry, yes.
And with me but fundamentally this is, yeah, we are kind of a backend. We are kind of powering a big index, pushing the content up to the big index with features and properties helping ranking team, caption team, Q&A team to retrieve this content. And at the end is fundamentally, if the content is not there, yeah, we cannot retrieve it. Step number one, as Dawn was highlighting, step number one is to be discovered. Step number two is to be selected. Then this is to be crawled. Then this is to be indexed. And then, yeah, you may have a chance to be surfacing in somewhere. So this is, the content need to be there. And additionally, as Jason was telling, properties in the content matter. So your content obviously matter. If you try to clone the facebook.com homepage, yeah, more likely you will not be at the position for Facebook query, because facebook.com is more important. But if you are unique content that really matter to your audience, yeah, you have a chance to be in a top position for query related to your content. So write good quality content and obviously augment the content with useful meta properties, schema and other things that can help us to make better use of the content.
Brilliant. So we have 8 minutes left. So basically everybody in the audience, you now have 8 minutes to ask all the questions you had for Dawn, Fabrice, and even myself, if anyone's interested in what I've got to say on the topic. And we did have a question from Alicia, which is coming back to quality and how you judge quality. And if we can have that on the screen, it's how do you algorithmically judge the quality of a website as you crawl it?
Clearly, there is, are we able to first access it? So Dawn spoke about crawl budget, and yeah, some sites are preventing us to access the content because we have limited crawl budget. So what you can do is go to Bing Webmaster Tool and tell, hey, crawl me more to get me access to the content. So first thing is obviously getting access to the content, things matter. Second thing is that, again, what we call quality of page matter. Mean, at the end is if we see an empty pages, if we see that we are not able to extract content from the pages, yeah, this matter. Obviously, avoid spam. Don't do keyword stuffing. Avoid machine learning generated content, and so on, because then, again, the quality of page will suffer, and you may not be able to be indexed and continue being crawled, because we may detect you as a spam site. So at the end is, again, think search engine as one customer, do the basic things that is recommended in Bing Webmaster Tool guidelines and other search engine guidelines, and you will be indexed.
Right.
Fabrice, sorry, on that point of quality, my understanding is ultimately that quality URLs are not document independent, i.e. they are seen as a bigger part of the whole site, you know, so it's really about improving everything. If you've got like 80% of your site is machine generated junk and you've got like this small percentage that's good, overall, that's a poor quality website, isn't it?
Yeah, you are at risk of being, because this machine learning content, generated content may be, let's say, index, because we may not be able to detect it at start. But when we discover, okay, this is a clone of this content in some form on other site, and so we say, okay, this content is kind of totally useless. So you may lose the benefit of your few percentage that is unique content. So again, what's happening is that sites are indexed, and then the index are demoted, and you don't see the benefit of the work on your good quality content. Yeah, so if you are, again, think like a customer, think search engine as a customer. If you are selling good things to the customer, but half of your product is bad, maybe we won't come back to your shop. So, yeah.
I was really intrigued by the breadth idea that you were talking about earlier on, Dawn, because I would tend to think, I find something interesting, I'll dig down, which is the rabbit hole thing that I just do all the time, and it's probably a mistake. Why don't you go down rabbit holes? Why do you try and spread it out, Fabrice?
We do all kind of techniques.
Okay.
If we see something that is very spiky, yeah, we may go to crawl it to see, okay, why people are interested by this URL. There is sites where we want to get about kind of a first level things. First level, this is this breadth thing, where, okay, you're on page, who think that we want to satisfy customer. So what customer will go on your site? They will go to the home page, they will click few links to go to the content. And not necessarily go to this page and continue digging into this content from this page. We are interested also by this kind of breadth where, oh yes, we want to know these first navigation links, where they are headed, and get a little bit more here. So there is a mix of breadth of where we want to get to everything, like navigation items, and then more depth where we feel the content is interesting.
So would you say that it's key to get that first level of a website, the first level into a high quality place, and then start, as a webmaster or site owner, you work at like just overflowing quality. So as the site grows, you just keep developing better quality at deeper levels, if you like.
Yeah. Again, think an analogy with a shopping site. If you try to develop a shopping site, a shopping business, so facility where you go and there is millions of products, it's something new, versus developing your audience small step by small steps. Certainly you will be more successful there. You will be developing your audience and developing your niche thing. If you try to be too big at start, okay, what this is all about? We will be suspicious about it. So again, think about develop your audience. Think like a customer. Don't come up with, hey, this is all the content on the earth that I crawl and found on the internet. I'm building this clone website with all this shopping and zip code and whatever. We see so many of this. Phone numbers. Okay. Who does not have a website that is cloning all the phone number database with all the phone numbers in the world, trying to get money and stuff like this? Yeah, there's so many of such. So yeah, you won't be indexed. Clearly, you won't be indexed deep versus having something that is really relevant, more useful. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, so we've got a couple of minutes left. I'd like to end with one last question for you, Fabrice, and then allow Dawn and yourself to conclude. The question was, what changes do you see in crawling and indexing in the next 5 to 10 years, which is a really rotten question. But I would love to hear what you've got to say, both Dawn and Fabrice. Theoretically, Dawn, because that's your thing, the academic side, what's going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, I mean, not just theoretical. I do work in SEO every day.
Oh, sorry, excuse me. I was terrible misrepresentation. I do apologize.
No problem. What I would say is, from what I believe it'll go much more data-driven. There'll be a lot more of the content will be data-driven content out there. And as Fabrice has kind of alluded to, I feel that there'll be much more of an extraction layer going on from search engines to actually extract more. I think there'll be obviously increasing amounts of supervised and semi-supervised machine learning going on in search? There has to be, because it's growing constantly, and how far can you go without switching on more and more machine learning? I think there'll be more and more of the natural language stuff. I think there will be some serverless stuff. I'm seeing some serverless things going on, funnily enough, in the natural language space. And obviously efficiency is, I think there'll be a lot of focus on trying to be more efficient ultimately, because that does seem to be a huge issue, particularly with the environmental concerns and footprint and so forth. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, if the web's growing exponentially, obviously efficiency is going to be becoming increasingly important. Fabrice, what's going to be happening in the next 5-10 years in your mind?
Two things. Two.
Ooh,
one,
just two.
Yes, two. One is machine learning and data-driven crawling. Clearly, machine learning, you spoke about the web is expanding exponentially. Machine learning is even steeper story.
Right.
So this is smarter and smarter and smarter. Yes,
right.
this is at high school today. Tomorrow it will be at PhD things. It will be really, really smart about understanding all this data and making decisions. But as I told you, the second thing is sites will help us. It's all about API integration moving forward. We will solve crawling on large sites and small sites, very small sites, by integration into content management system, API integration. We are working on that. This will be game changer. And we will continue to do machine learning and things like this on other sites, but clearly this is the direction we are headed.
That's absolutely brilliant. For me, that's the best conclusion to this specific topic we could possibly have had. Best conclusion to webinar I've heard in many, 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 many years. Thank you very much, Fabrice. Thank you, Dawn. Thank you to the audience for your questions and your participation. And a big thank you to Anton, who has now organized the first webinar on Duda. 100%, absolutely brilliant job, Anton. And I'm really looking forward to the series we're about to have. So thank you, Fabrice. Thank you, Dawn. Thank you, the audience. Thank you, Anton. And goodbye. Brilliant.